Good morning again, folks. Good to be with you. We're talking about Nehemiah. And as Nehemiah faced a crisis of personal and national consequence, his first response was to drop to his knees in prayer. Not to get up and do something about it, not to get up and take arms, but to just pray and humble himself and confess before God. He saw God's glory as profoundly entwined with God's intervention in the lives of his people. In other words, if God's people are living defeated lives of fear and insecurity, then what does that say about God? What does that say about Him? If God's people are a wreck all over the land, He's saying, what is the testimony of that for their God? It's a powerful to realize that God's glory is tied up in the way you and I deal with our challenges in life. God's glory is either displayed to the world or not displayed to the world in that specific way. And as the story begins, we don't know anything about the significance of Nehemiah in that Babylonian exile. As this starts, we just know the name Nehemiah. We don't know anything about him. After recording this entire prayer for us in chapter 1, Nehemiah makes one simple declaration in the 11th verse, the last phrase of the verse. He says simply this: I was cupbearer to the king. That's all. I was cupbearer to the king. With all this concern for the well-being of his entire nation, you might find it surprising that Nehemiah was just a cupbearer. You might have thought he was a prince or some sort of another kind of royalty, or you might have thought he was a priest from the way he was praying for his people. But he's a cupbearer for the king of Babylon, a position that created an opportunity for him to either have the ear of the king to do something great, or to hide away and selfishly think of his own preservation and just stay safe. The fact that he rose to the role of cupbearer testifies to the fact that even in exile he never sank to self-pity. He lived honorably. He earned esteem enough to be trusted with this very important role close to the king, the role of watching over the king's food and drink so that he would keep the king safe. A cupbearer was someone who was always very close to the king. And now he is preparing to risk all of that. He's preparing to put all of that on the table for the sake of doing what is right. He is going to present his dilemma to the king and pray that he does that. At the end of the last verse, he says, God, grant me success as I go before this man. This man is the king of Babylon, and he's going to plead his case, and he asks God for success. The first step of prayer, before we do anything, is to put God on his throne. And that sounds really strange because obviously God is on his throne, and neither you nor I nor anyone else can knock him off that throne. It's not like he's not on his throne. But while we have no say over God being on his throne in the universal sense, I'm talking about our attitude towards God in our own lives, the throne in our own lives. There we do have something to say about it. There is a choice whether God is on the throne or not. In my life, many things sit on the throne at times in place of God. Sometimes I sit there. Sometimes it looks like a comfortable throne. I just go and I plop myself down on it, and I sit there absorbed in my own concerns, my own plans, my own efforts, my own worries about what to do. Sometimes the problem or the concern or the tragedy knocks everything else off the throne, and it just sits there, and it becomes so large I can't see anything else. Or perhaps the thing that's sitting on that throne is my desire to please other people. Maybe there's other people on that throne instead of Jesus that I'm trying to find favor with. There's a story, a parable of sorts, that's told about a man who's seeking knowledge from the philosopher Socrates. And Socrates took him to the ocean, and he walked into the water, and he took the man by the head, and he grabbed his hair, and he pushed his head under the water, and he held him down there for a few moments, and then he pulled him out again. And he said, what is it you desire? The man said, knowledge. And so he took his head and he put it down there again, and he held it a little longer, and he said, "What is it you desire?" And he said, "Knowledge." Then he took the guy's head and he put it down there so long that the guy started choking and thought he was going to drown, and he started fighting and tried to pull up, and finally he let the guy up, and he was choking and spitting water all over the place, and he said, "What do you desire?" He said, "I need air. I need air to breathe. I need air to live." And Socrates said, when you desire knowledge as much as air in this moment, then you have taken the first step towards knowledge. You know, instead of allowing our trials to defeat us, instead of allowing them to form our character and give us an excuse to bring out the worst attributes, let's see first who's sitting on the throne in our lives. Have we knocked God off the throne? And let's make sure, if we have, that we put him back there. In our adversity, the world sees what Jesus means to us. What does the world think about Jesus when it looks at you, when it looks at me? At such times, our prayer should be for them to see a testimony of his grace and his love in our lives, and that is victory. If the world sees Jesus through us, that's victory. When we desire God's glory more than comfort, more than rescue, when we need God's glory as deeply as we need life and breath to live, then we will have attained the first step towards living a victorious Christian life. Meditate on that in your prayers today, and God bless you. I'll see you next week.